Hello, everybody. Thank you all so much for joining us tonight. This is Left Bank Books presents, all the way from the UK, the New York Times bestselling author Chris Whitaker, who will be here to discuss his fantastic, incredible, thrilling, and sharp new novel, All the Colors of the Dark. We're very excited to have him today. According to Gillian Flynn, this book hits like a sledgehammer and is an absolute must-read novel. Chris will be in conversation tonight with Left Bank Books' very own Shane Mullen, who's our events coordinator and keeps so many things running at all times. He is remarkable, and we're excited to have you too, bud. So some notes before we begin. Tonight's event is only possible because of all of your support. So when you support Left Bank Books, your money goes directly into our local economy. So it paves the streets sometimes, it keeps the parks beautiful, all the other things that make St. Louis amazing. And it helps to get writers the support that they deserve and allows us to produce events such as this. So thank you all so much for shopping local and joining us tonight. We also want to welcome everybody in our virtual audience, wherever you are joining us from. Thank you for being here. You will be able to participate in the question and answer period toward the end by typing your question as a YouTube comment, so we appreciate you as well. At Left Bank Books, we are always working hard to plan new events for readers of all ages. We've always got several a week, so there's a lot going on. Our website is left-bank.com. You can see a full calendar of our events. But of note, next week, Wednesday the 31st, we'll have the great James Patterson with us, who will be discussing his newest book. That will be at the Toole Auditorium at UMSL. Ticket information is on left-bank.com, so there's still time to grab your tickets and join us for that. So I'm going to pass it off to Shane to introduce our author and book tonight. So thank you all so much. Here's Shane.
Thank you. Thank you, Evan. It's excellent. Do you know that? Oh, hi. First off, thank you all so much for coming out today. If you did not know, we did have an earlier celebration today to celebrate 50 years of Chris Kleindienst being the working here at Left Bank Books. So today is officially Chris Kleindienst Day. We got a proclamation from the mayor. So special shout out. We continue the celebration all day long. And if anyone really wants a boozy beverage after this event, let me know, because we do have a little bit left over. I created a very nice ginger peach infusion wine spritzer cocktail. So I've got some ready for you if you want it. I am super excited tonight to be in conversation with Chris Whitaker. This is our second time being in conversation. First time in person, so this is really exciting. Chris is joining us all the way from the UK. This book is a read with Jenna pick, and we are so excited to welcome you to St. Louis. I don't know if this is your first time. That is one of my questions. We will be getting to that here in a moment, but without further ado, would you all please help me in welcoming the incredible Chris Whitaker. All right, are you ready?
I'm ready. It is my first time as well.
Fantastic.
And thank you for coming, because apparently I'm competing with a naked bike ride today. So I think where you could have been.
I mean, you can run out and do the after party is really great.
Wow.
That is happening right
Is
now.
that a thing? They do it every year.
Yes, they do. Yeah, actually, I have friends that write in it every year, so it's a lot of fun. And normally I'm
Right.
no, I'm not one of the writers. My bike has 2 flat tires. All right, I want to start. I don't normally pull out the ARC, but I do really want to read the letter from your incredible editor, your very well-known, very popular, and amazing.
I haven't read all of this. They didn't send me that version of it, so this will be the first time I'm hearing it.
Oh, she's great. All right, I don't know what's in the final copy because I have been playing with this one, but it says, "Dear reader, when I first met Chris Whitaker, I was filled with questions. Who was this former stockbroker working part-time in a library? And why was he, a British man, writing novels? No, why was he a British man setting his novels in America? And why was he so damn good at it? As I get ready to publish Chris's next novel after the New York Times bestselling We Begin at the End, I wish I could say I have more answers than questions, but that's not true. I could tell you I've learned Chris doesn't sleep, which I knew that, that anyone who meets him falls under his spell. I would say it was his charm, but that implies magic, and what Chris has is very much real. And that he has such a contagious enthusiasm for this crazy business of publishing, such an appreciation for booksellers and librarians and readers. What I cannot answer is how Chris has managed to pull off such a staggeringly accomplished novel. While he is attracted to dark subject matters, there is always heart and humor throughout. All the Colors of the Dark defies categorization. It is a novel about a serial killer, missing girls, first love, soulmates, what lurks in the shadows of obsession, and the blinding light of hope. I hope you enjoy it. That's incredible.
Nice. It's not all true, but
well, I know for a fact that you don't sleep because our last event, you were joining us from your writing shed.
yeah, like 1 a.m. or something like that.
Yes.
Yeah, it's our brutal time difference.
Because I offered, I was like, oh, we can do it like in the afternoon, and they were like, no.
Yeah, it was COVID, wasn't it?
Yes, it was,
yeah. And that's why I couldn't tour, so this is the first time I've been touring.
So I want to ask one of the questions that she brings up, which is, why do you set your novels in America? Oh, in case you couldn't tell from the accent.
I'm a Londoner. Yeah.
Chris is not from around here, so this is not a Missouri accent, just in disguise.
I do love it round here, though. Is this like a really expensive area? Because we went for a walk out here, and the houses, like the biggest houses I've ever seen.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's really fancy.
This is a very nice, very historic neighborhood. It came up around the 1904 World's Fair. So a lot of these houses were somewhat a part of that.
Okay, so why America?
Yes.
So I have to tell you some of the backstory, my backstory for why America, because it's quite strange. So I left school with no qualifications. I went out the night before my economics exam and got really drunk, and got a grade N because I missed the exam the next day. And I didn't know grade N was the thing. And then you have that here. But my teacher said it stands for no future, which is the worst thing I've ever heard. Really brutal. And so I kind of, that put paid to university. You know, it just wasn't on the cards for me. And so I was out bouncing around. You know, I did loads of different jobs. I kind of naively thought that something would find me. You know, I just thought like my friends were on the paths that they wanted to be on, to be doctors and things like that. And you have to choose quite early, don't you? I mean, you're like 16, 17, 18, you're expected to know what you wanted to do. And I just didn't. I had no idea at all. I definitely didn't want to be a writer. I went to quite a rough school in London. Like, no one was a writer in my school. And so I was working as a real estate agent, but just like an office junior. And I was putting leaflets through people's doors one morning. It was like about 9:30 in the morning in North London. And someone came up to me and they asked to borrow my cell phone. And I knew that I was going to get mugged because I'd grown up in London, you know, my friends had been mugged. It was a strange thing to ask. And I also, it was one guy. And so I didn't want to give him my phone. And I've been in loads of fights and loads of trouble as a kid, so it wasn't that unusual, you know, to get into a fight. So we had a bit of a fight, and it was just like I thought it would be. I had a bit of a black eye. It wasn't that bad until he pulled out a kitchen knife, and I remember thinking that it was too big. This knife, you know, I thought there's no way he's going to use it. I thought it was just to scare me, and I thought he was punching me, and then he stepped back, and I had a white shirt on, and I looked down, it was completely red, and he had stabbed me 3 times in the side, and it was such a big knife that it had gone in the side and come out the other side, and so, yeah, it was really, really bad, and I still didn't give him my phone afterwards. And then he went to stab me in the chest, so he would have killed me for my phone. And I grabbed the knife and it cut through my hand, and I dropped the phone and it smashed. And he picked up all the pieces and ran off. And so I was left on this street in London, not knowing what to do. You know, I didn't have a phone to call for help. There was no one around. Everyone was at work. And so I got myself back to my car, managed to drive to the hospital, and just about made it there. before I was like blacking out, so I was losing loads of blood. And I was stitched back together again, and I was okay. You know, aside from scars that I still have now, I was all right physically. Mentally, I wasn't prepared for it. You know, all my friends slapped me on the back in the way that guys do sometimes. You know, it's a bit toxic masculinity. You know, you're expected to be able to handle these things. And my dad was slightly like that as well. He was worried about me, but kind of like they all kept saying that I was brave, and I didn't feel brave because I just remember it wasn't really a choice. It felt like this innate thing, you know, that I just categorically refused to give someone something that they haven't worked for, or that is mine, that I've worked for. And I didn't know what PTSD was, so I didn't know why I wasn't reading anymore. I was a big reader, always have been. I didn't read a book. I just used to keep rereading the same page over and over. I didn't watch TV, and I wasn't eating properly, and I was exercising too much, like kind of manically. I'd go for a run, just keep running, and then get a bus back because I've gone so far, and I didn't really know where I was. And it was really frightening. You know, it's only now that I look back at it that I realised how bad it was, and how much I'm still worried about that feeling coming back, because I didn't really feel like me anymore. I remember looking in the mirror and just not recognising myself, and it was terrifying. And so my parents split up when I was a kid, and my mum had to get extra jobs because we didn't have any money. And I used to go home to an empty house, and I hated it. Like in the winter, you know, the house is dark. I didn't want to go home, so I used to go to the library and wait there till she finished. And so the library was kind of my place that I went to when I was feeling scared. And so I went to the library, and I got a book from the library. It was a self-help book, and it talked about a technique, a therapeutic writing technique, where you take what had happened and you write about it, but you change the people involved to fictional characters. You change the location to the last place you were happy, and you change the outcome to something you can control. And my dad had taken us to Disney World when I was a kid, so America was it was the last place I was happy. So when I sat down to write something, like my life in London was a bit of a mess, and everything was falling apart. But mentally, I was 4,000 miles away in the US. And so I kept this up, you know, this US thing, and it still works for me now. And it still works when I'm reading. Generally, I prefer to read something that's not set in the place that I live, because I like that escapism.
Since I am from Missouri, and since the book does begin here, how do you, I assume you have not been to where the book starts.
Or any of the places.
How did you develop characters that were such a part of the place that they come from? So I feel like these characters are slightly universal. Like they could be from anywhere, but they're not. They're from here, and they have characteristics, and they feel like they are from here. So how did you, as a writer, make the characters have that sense of place without ever having stuff like it?
It was really, really tough, and I spent like the first year just writing dialogue between the characters, and so like for the first 6 months it was just Patch and Sane, who are the lead characters in the book. It was just conversations between them, because I was interested in the things that they hold back and the things that they offer up. And like Patch in the book, his dad dies in Vietnam, and his mum is completely incapable of being a mum. He never tells anyone that. He never tells Sane that. And I thought that was really interesting, so that when the book begins, I knew exactly how he would react to every situation. And Sane lives with her grandmother and is incredibly capable and brilliant, and she kind of lays that down. She catches her first real friend, and she doesn't want to scare him away. So that was the characters, like getting into their heads. But then for the location, it was really difficult, because I'm a strong believer in that gut feeling, and nothing, I couldn't find a location for it. I was working in the library at the time, and I was looking through a non-fiction book, and there was a picture of Dogwood Canyon, and it was really beautiful, and I got this feeling that that's where the book should be set. And the book isn't set next in a fictional town, but that features, it has its name changed because I moved everything around geographically. But it's just endless research, really. Like I found a website where you can listen to people talk, which is as boring as it sounds. Like you could pick a small town in Missouri and you could listen to someone read a transcript, and so you can pick up on speech patterns like that. So that kind of, you get into the cadence of how they're going to speak, which really helps. And then from there, it's just obsessive research. It's like I spent years just reading non-fiction, looking at maps, travel guides, reading fiction, watching TV, documentaries, listening to radio programs, things like that from the areas that are featured in the book. And then I begin to build their world, and it takes forever. And it's so like there's a scene where Patch, it becomes a miner. He works in a mine in Missouri in the 70s. So I spent a month researching mining in Missouri in the 70s for what is a paragraph in the book. It's like 4 lines in the end of it. But I overwrite it massively, so I'll know everything there is to know about this profession. I want to know what the mine feels like, what temperature it is, what it smells like, what it feels like underfoot, everything you can think of. And then I'll overwrite it massively, and it will be hugely overwritten. And the book was probably like 500,000 words when I finished it, and then I cut it back to 130, because it's the only way to end up with this feeling that you're standing next to Patch in this mine.
That was another one of my questions. Literally, if left to your own devices, would this book have been a very hefty tome?
It's much bigger in the UK. Yeah, just because the paper, they use like a thinner paper here, but in the UK it's twice the size. It's like a Bible. It's like really chunky, heavy. Yeah, you wouldn't believe it if you saw them side by side. And I don't know if you've seen the cover, they're completely different. Yeah. The jackets often are, aren't they, UK, US, and Germany as well. The Germans have terrible covers. Is this going on YouTube? But they've taken the UK cover and I love it, and their cover, from backtracking really quickly, their cover for We Begin at the End was perfect as well. I have seen some bad German covers. And the same with the French. I think it's just a different thing, isn't it? Different markets, different things work.
So you mentioned extensive research, and the book kind of, you can feel like this is well done, knowledgeable. How do you keep track of all that as you're going through the process?
It's just a mess. Honestly, it's a total mess. I missed my deadline by 2 years. Just completely. They just stopped asking for the book. They paid loads of money for the book and then just gave it. It was like they'd written it off. They were just prepared to leave me alone, I think. And I'm not sure that I did keep track of it properly at first, because I write out of order. So if year 1 is dialogue, year 2 I begin writing scenes completely out of order, because it takes a toll. Like in the book, Patch is 13 and he's walking to school, and he hears a girl being abducted, and so he steps in and gets taken, and she gets away. So he kind of lives her life. He goes down this road that she should have gone down, and then he's held in a basement, and in the basement he hears a voice, and it belongs to a girl called Grace, and the two of them spend 300 days together, roughly 300 days, in the dark, having not seen each other, and they kind of fall in love or develop this really strong bond. And so when Patch gets out and can't find his way back to her, he's like distraught, and begins this obsessive search for her that takes us from 1975 until 2001, where the book ends. So we follow him, from childhood to adulthood, and so writing the scenes in the basement between the two of them was quite heavy. It was quite a difficult thing to do, and I found that it used to affect my mood, because I'd spend so much time writing this really heavy stuff. So I would break constantly. I'd switch forward and write, saying getting ready for prom or something like that. I'll skip way into the future and write something else, just to kind of break it up a bit. So I never really kept track of it until the 3rd year. And that's when I begin to piece it back together, and it begins to look like the story that you read.
Wow,
Apparently it's really weird to write.
I don't think any other author has mentioned that has a similar process.
No, I did an event with Nita Prose, and she had something similar. It wasn't entirely dissimilar. Other authors have been horrified. I've done events with them. Probably just can't believe it.
I'm not horrified. So. The structure, the chapters. So this is not typical. I mean, there's so much about this book that's not typical, and I think that's why a lot of people are really drawn to it and really able to be sucked in so wholly to the book. And some of the chapters, how many people have actually, the book's been out for about a month now, so we have a few people that have read it.
No spoilers.
Yes, yeah, we're not. And that was not my like, oh, now we're gonna ruin it for everyone. That'd be terrible. But for those of you that have, like, the chapters, like, it has a very unique chapter structure, which I thought was incredible. And I'm wondering, did you have inspiration from other books? Did you, like, 'cause we know that you have not gone to school for writing, that this is your own. So how did that come about? And is that something that you feel is very unique to your style?
I'm not sure, because the other books aren't like this. Like We Begin at the End doesn't have the short chapters. This book, like, no chapter is longer than about 5 pages, and most average about 3, sometimes 2. And again, it came about because of the writing style, because I needed to break so often, because it was parts of it was so difficult to write, and I constantly needed the breaks. And then, so when I began to read it back and began to piece it back together, there were lots of natural breaks. And I quite like it. If you're going to read a big book, and it's like nearly 600 pages, but I think there's about 260 chapters, something like that. Is it 262? Is it 262?
261.
Okay, so
Yep.
close. Someone came up to me the other day, I did an event, and asked me to recite the opening lines to them, and I couldn't do it. I just completely drew a blank, and I was so disappointed, because I've read it like 1,000 times. I was so disappointed with myself afterwards. And then I've reread it now, and I could recite it, but don't ask me to.
That's not one of my questions.
That's good. So the chapter thing, I like it. I like when I'm reading something, because it can feel quite daunting going into someone's life story, which is basically what this is. But if you can, it makes the just one more chapter a lot easier. If you're going to be done in 2 pages, if you're going to bed, if you're tired, one more chapter is 2 or 3 pages. So it felt like a good way as well to keep the pace going over what is a fairly chunky book.
To jump all over the place, this was agreed with Winnipeg for July. It was July. June.
Yeah.
Yes. I don't even know what month it is. James Patterson is next week, and then it'll be August.
So what is this new book? James Patterson?
He has like 14 new books.
Yeah. Is it written with someone else?
Yes.
They're often written.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah.
Is that another author?
Yes.
He is a sports author.
Okay.
So
Because I saw Louise Penny and Hillary Clinton.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
We've hosted Louise. We have also hosted Hillary Clinton. Yeah. Hillary has been in the store.
Very cool. Apparently Bill Clinton read We Begin at the End. And I was talking to Jenna, and her dad has read The Colours of the Dark. So I've got 2 ex-presidents. Which for someone like me, if you could have seen the school I went to, it's really mind-blowing. But I was saying last night, I that is really cool, but I only got starstruck when there was a show called The OC. Do you remember The OC? So Summer in The OC posted herself reading a picture of her reading a book, and I was like, wow, it's Summer from The OC. Forget the president.
What was it like when it was announced?
When it was announced, it was ridiculous. It was like, Matt, did you see it when it was announced?
No, I didn't.
Because she, I don't know if it was just off the cuff, but she said it was one of the best books she's ever read and the best book she's ever picked. And which was like, and I bumped into some of the authors that have been picked before. I was doing the Today Show the other day and saw Emma Stroud coming in, and she made a very funny comment about not being Jenna's favourite. But because she had been so effusive, it went straight to #1 on Amazon and it wasn't due out for weeks, within like 2 hours or something. And I credit that to Jenna. But she's just amazing. She is the most lovely person. Like really, really cool and really enthusiastic about the book and books in general, and reads absolutely everything. Yeah, she really does. Like she knows the
It's
story.
also a book of the month pick as well.
Yeah, I don't really know what that is as much
It's a,
because someone brought one last night for me to
I have
sign.
one for you.
And it's got a different cover,
No, it's
slightly.
the cover.
Yeah, but the back
It's
is
the
like
back, yeah, it's a little bit different.
the back is plain.
It's a.
And are they all the same size or something? That's what someone told me last night. They're like that. Yeah. Oh, there's one there. Yeah. It does. Yeah. It's not.
It's flat.
It's matte, isn't it, as
It's
well?
matte.
The cover. And the back has nothing on it.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. I'd never seen one before.
There's no ISBN.
Oh, I did.
I didn't know that the backs were blank.
I really like it.
It's
It is
nice.
really cool. Yeah. So Rick and Jenna. So I had this really weird time like about a year ago. So the book, I didn't think the book was quite ready, but my film agent sent it out. And I flew to New York and took loads of meetings and met with loads of studios like Sony and like everyone really big and I met with Jenna as well, and Jenna I loved straight away because she knew the story like no one else knew it, like inside out, every page in the book she knew. And I also met with Sue Nagel, who was the boss at HBO, and they did Game of Thrones and things like that for like 10 years. And Universal, and I loved all of them. And there's a bookstagrammer called Geordie Loves Books, Jordan Mobler, yeah, who is also the book to film guy at Universal, which is his real job. And he did it at Netflix before in Disney, and he had been the one that put together We Begin at the End with Disney. And so he was involved in it, and I wanted all of them, and my agent wanted all of them, and they agreed to all work together, which was really cool. And then like a few months after that, I found out it was a Jenna book club pick, but ages before everyone else finds out. And they take it so seriously. You are not allowed to tell anyone. And I am terrible at keeping secrets. So I was like biting my lip the whole time. And then I flew to Aspen and met Jenna there, and it was really surreal because we did our first event in Explorer Books. Have you ever been to Aspen? I don't know if anyone's ever been there.
Aspen, Colorado?
Yeah,
That's beautiful.
it's so beautiful. It's so expensive, isn't it? Yeah, it really
That's
is.
That's old money. Aspen's old money. There was new money.
Okay.
I'm from Denver originally.
Okay,
Yeah,
Yeah, I
so
was-
Aspen is old
but
money.
I thought I could live there. If
Yeah,
I could
it's
afford
beautiful
it,
there,
I would
but it's
live
very
there.
expensive.
Yeah, it really was. And we did
Listen
this.
to London.
Yeah, no, I think that the US is way more expensive than the UK.
Okay.
Like food and things like that. I don't know how anyone affords it. Honestly, it's like London to New York. I reckon London's like half the price. Yeah,
Wow.
yeah, London is way cheaper. Yeah, come to London. Well, things like I went into, I don't know if it's like that in all supermarkets, but we went into a supermarket in Aspen and it was like $10 for a frozen pizza. Is that normal?
Yeah.
Oh, that's Aspen.
In the UK, it would be £2. So about like $3.50 for the same sort of thing. So like way cheaper. But apparently people get paid more in the US. So that's what my rich New York agent tells me. So, yeah. Anyway, so I was in Aspen with Jenna and we did this thing called the Aspen Ideas Festival, which is $5,000 a ticket to put it under. And we completely shamed ourselves because there was all this free stuff. And so we just filled up a backpack with free things.
Good, Jenna.
No, not Jenna.
Oh.
Only on their behalf. And so I had this really weird time with Jenna because she was showing me her phone. She was showing me messages on her phone. And they were like blow by blow of the book, going through page by page. I can't believe someone's done this. And it was Oprah on the other end of it. Yeah, which was so cool. And as well, there was a picture Oprah had taken of a page that she was reading. She had highlighted something. And in the back was what I thought, the background was what I thought was a luxury hotel. And it was Oprah's house. Which was very cool. So basically the whole Jenna thing has been amazing. And then I did the Today Show and I met Hoda, who was really cool. And I asked her if she ever gets, because they do this thing, right? So you've got a studio full of people and they're counting it down like from 10 seconds till you go back live and you're just having a conversation. And I'm thinking we've got 2 seconds left. And they're still just talking. And I asked Hoda if she ever gets nervous, and she said some celebrities really get that. And I said who? And she said Harrison Ford. Yeah, she just like it goes to pieces with Harrison Ford. But they were just so nice.
Yeah.
Really, really like the most lovely, kind people.
Be thinking of what time is it? Yeah. Definitely be thinking about questions in the audience. We'll open that up here in a little bit. But I want you to talk more about because I loved that you joined us from your writing shed. What does that look like, and what does your day look like in terms of being able to fully immerse yourself into your writing? And I love that you are able to jump around because yes, you do hit some very intense, very dark subjects. And
I didn't mean to though. I genuinely didn't mean to do it. I was just looking at what happens, when something bad happens to you when you're a kid. And I was kind of plotting my life back from where I am now and thinking of all the things that have happened to me. And I was doing the same with Patch. And it went back. So when I was 10, an adult came into my life after my parents broke up. And he was a drinker and quite violent. And one night I was asleep and he came into my room and pulled me out of bed by my arm. And we both hurt the bone break. And he wouldn't let me get any help. And was worried that he was going to get into trouble, and also had a go at me, was kind of shouting at me to stop crying, keep quiet. And so I had a really long night in my room, and then in the morning told my parents that I'd done it playing football. And I think that up until that point, I was a normal kid. I felt like a normal kid, and I was interested in football, things like that, just normal things. And then after that, it was completely different. And I can that was my sliding doors moment. I can pinpoint exactly when my life changed. And afterwards, I stopped sleeping. I haven't slept since then, not properly. And I've tried therapy and things like that, and it doesn't work, or hasn't worked for me. And so I was looking at my life afterwards, and I think that I got stabbed because I didn't like feeling like a victim when I was a kid. So when someone asked me for my phone, I just flat out wouldn't give it to them, and I think that it's probably got me into loads of trouble. I got into trouble. I worked in the city and lost loads of money and got into trouble there because I had learned as a kid not to ask for help when something goes wrong. If something bad happens, you keep it quiet, you deal with it yourself. And so I was tracking Patch in the same way. He steps in when this girl would have got taken, and then afterwards comes out and he's someone completely different. And it's really hard for his best friend because she's lost this boy, that is her only friend, and then he comes back and he's someone different, and she doesn't really recognise him, and that's because of this thing that's happened to him. And everyone tells him he was brave for stepping in, but to him it wasn't bravery because he didn't choose it; he just reacted. And I kind of felt the same way. And also, I never would have found writing. There's no way I would have written that book and been sat here talking to you now had these things not happened to me. It wouldn't have been on the cards for me. And in the book, Patch comes out and he begins painting his idea of what this girl looks like, the missing girl, even though he hasn't seen her. And he is a boy that would never have picked up a paintbrush. He's a kid that probably wouldn't have left the town that he grew up in. But this terrible thing happens, and all these other amazing things happen to him. He becomes a successful, wealthy artist. These aren't spoilers. And then he goes off traveling around the US, and he sees the most amazing things, and that's kind of where the title comes from. All this light comes in, all this color comes into his life, and I really wanted to explore that, and to explore whether when something bad happens when you're a kid, if you can kind of get past that, because sometimes it feels like you can't. I've always felt slightly different because of it, and I've always had a hard time with certain things. And it feels like that is just the way it's supposed to be for me. But it's only of late that I've realised it doesn't have to be like that. And just talking about it has made it way easier.
That actually reminds me, was that abduction, was that something you found, like an example of in your research, since you did a lot of research? Having lived in St. Louis for as many years as I have now, but being from small town Missouri, the crimes that happen in small town are much more terrifying than the crimes that happen regularly around. And I mean, it might be that it's a different way that they're reported, that it is, that it impacts a greater geographic community than when crime happens in the city, and it feels like not as many people know the person that is, because it's harder to know like everyone in St. Louis than it is in my hometown. The small town crime it's reported on differently. It is often we get to know more about the person afterwards than we do in larger newspapers. They report the story and it's gone. We don't get to hear a lot about the family. We don't get to hear a lot about the person themselves. So, did you find stories in your research that kind of inspired this, or is this how did that come about?
Nothing directly inspired it, and I didn't realise that my childhood kind of inspired it until I was halfway through writing and began to think like, why am I writing this? Why is it affecting me so badly? But I get what you mean. Like the small town thing, I think it's because you leave the city and there's an illusion of safety. And when something goes wrong, it's like because you're kind of in a bubble, aren't you? In a cocoon. If something bad happens, it's the outside coming in. And that's a really vulnerable feeling. It's like I left London and moved to a smaller town, based right on the edge of London, and lived there for a long time. And so it feels like you've done that to kind of, I did it because I didn't want to raise kids in London. And then so when something bad happens there, it's, it feels more personal. And I think it definitely does in these towns. Like I wrote about it in Cape Haven in Weekly at the End. And it's definitely the case in this, because as well you have these policemen and they're kind of autonomous, they kind of run the show, and in that is Chief Nix, and it's his job, he feels personally it's his job to keep everyone safe. And when he realises that he can't do that, it's frightening for everyone. And I think most of all himself, there's a feeling of failure, like he's failed at the only thing that he's supposed to do, and perhaps you wouldn't get that same feeling in a big city where crime kind of rains down constantly. You certainly wouldn't in London, because it's a daily problem. These things happen constantly, and there's huge teams of people, policing the area. But it was just really interesting to me, and always is. I will always set my books in small towns.
The way you talk about Chief Nix made me think. I feel like you might be the type of author that puts your characters through hypothetical situations that you don't put them through in the pages of the book. Because I feel like they know what they're going to do. Like they have they have structure to their lives. I feel like they are so well rounded that I can imagine them in other scenarios doing other things and making other choices. And I feel like that is the character that you have built, is that yes, these characters are so rich that you can imagine them off the page and imagine them into a world that I feel is just a continuation of the story.
I think that's because I have written those scenarios, because I've overwritten it so much, and I kind of have been down that road, and I go down a million dead ends with the characters, and there's so much stuff that to someone reading it, because it doesn't make the final cut, but if you were to read the entire story that I wrote, there would be loads, like tens of thousands of words of nothing, of what looks like nothing, like where they're just going about their daily lives. Or to me, it's like really interesting, and I write it out, and then get to know them in that way. And it's only by doing that and cutting it back that you're left with that feeling that I'm glad you have when you read it, because you should feel by the end of it like you know them, almost like their family, because you've watched this kid or these kids grow up, through the pages. And most of the book isn't crime or mystery. Most of the book is what happens afterwards. It's family and what that means. The changing meaning of that word. It's coming of age. It's first love. It's going to work. And trying to build a home and things like that, and everything about just living and how that is affected by this terrible thing that happens. And by the end of it, I wanted to answer the question: can Patch get through it? Can he kind of write his own ending? even though the start of his story was kind of rewritten by this terrible thing that's happened to him.
I didn't ask before, and I kind of want, would you read a little bit? Do you have?
Yeah, of course.
Okay.
I hardly ever have to read.
Okay.
This is a treat. Okay.
I typically don't ask authors, but I would love to hear you read.
Okay, so this is just after Patch has heard a scream, and it's a girl called Misty. He's heard a scream, and he is walking to school, and his life is about to change. Patch desperately looked around for anyone at all, anyone who could handle this, who could ease the responsibility, the acute burden of seeing a girl in trouble. Another scream. He whispered a curse, reached a hand up and touched the eye patch, as his mind ran to Silver Tongue Martin and Wild Dead Blow, the band of Fearless. He moved. Misty screamed as Patch slid down the bank. He bent low and wished he had a slingshot as he picked up a rock. At 10 feet away, the man heard him and turned. A balaclava hid all but the dead of his eyes. Patch held his breath, held the rock, and dropped low as he took the man down at the knees. Run, Patch yelled. Misty stood frozen, fear claiming her muscles. Shirt torn, her bag in the dirt, dazed like she'd been dragged into a nightmare. The man rolled over him. Run, Patch managed to whisper, his lungs empty. He felt a hand at his throat, and he begged Misty with his eye, snapped from it. Finally, she saw him. She was tall, a track star. Their eyes met, and then she turned and pumped her eyes and lit out through the woodland. The man was up and moving to follow her, but Patch was right up with him. He pulled the dagger for the second time that morning. The man grabbed his wrist and twisted. The sun hit the blade till it met Patch's stomach. He fell back to the ground and clutched at the wound, and the forest around turned to night. But he saw no moon and no stars. The next day, an army of walkers would beat the woodland to find the purple eye patch with the silver star. Chief Nix would run over every bad man within 100 miles. His mother would fall apart entirely. His best friend, Saint, would stalk the streets when hope had long since burned, getting herself into another world of trouble. None would yet know of the evolving tragedy that would be their lives.
And do we have some questions from the audience? Thank you.
One of the things I really like is the way that you do incorporate younger people into your books, the younger people. And now I understand a little more why you do. When I first read the beginning at the end, it truly reminded me of a John Hart, not in a bad way, but in a good way, of a John Hart book, The Last Child. And I just wonder if you're familiar with John Hart, or are there other authors that kind of influence you? William K. Kruger also sometimes writes characters like that. And I just
So John Hart changed my life.
Oh, I love him too.
Yeah, so I was working in the city and completely miserable, and I'd lost loads of money and paid it back, got myself into trouble, got myself out of trouble, and then I picked up The Last Child and I read it, and it was so beautiful. It's such a beautiful book, it really is. And then I went home and I googled John Hart, and I saw that he was a success. I read an interview and he said he was a successful lawyer, and one day he just quit his job because he hated it and he wanted to write a book. And so the next day I quit my job without discussing it or anything. I had 2 kids at the time, and 2 small kids at the time. I've got 3 kids now. But, my boys were little, and we had no money coming in, and so I started working 3 jobs and sold our house, sold our car, and began writing because I'd read the John Hart book. And I did an event when we were doing our events. One of the events was with John Hart. It was like 3 o'clock in the morning because I think he lives in North Carolina or South Carolina, one of the Carolinas. And so it was like 3 a.m. and there was hardly anyone on there. And it was just, I got to tell John Hart that he had changed my life. And it was really cool. So I can't believe you brought that up.
Yeah, I agree with you very much.
Thank you.
I did not have a job when I read that book.
So speaking of authors that inspire you, when I started reading the book, I thought of Stephen King. That's who, the small town, the young kids. There's a lot of things about your book that reminded me of him as an author. And I heard at the Read with Jenna, I was there at that one. And I heard you talking about reading so many Stephen King books. And
Yes.
I thought if you could talk about that a little bit,
Yeah,
how that
so,
was influenced.
yeah, just when I was a kid, It was the first adult book that I read. I was about 10 or 11. And my dad, yeah, no, because I'd only read kids' books, and my dad had a shelf of Stephen King books, and it was forbidden. So of course, I read it the second I could, and I used to go to the library and read it, and I would stash it in the kids section. And I always think back now to some poor kids probably picked up some bit by Stephen King and had nightmares like I did when I was a kid. But he's just brilliant. He's like the best for a reason. Thank you very much. But yeah, so kind of like from then, it was the first time I realised that how books could make you feel. There's that kind of terror, and I didn't know that. You know, I'd only wanted to watch scary films when I was a kid, but after that, I wanted to read, you know, scary books, and just I was just addicted from then, and so that was my first Stephen King book, and from there, just read adult books as a kid, and that set me on my path.
I have to ask you, do you think Duchess, is she done?
Everyone asked me this question.
A beautiful book, by the way, my
Thank
first to read of you, and
Thanks.
slow burn is not even close. I mean, I just took my time with it, and I really like the blurbs on the front, with "this is to be savored," and absolutely, but what about Duchess?
So Duchess, that book was a year in the life of Duchess, wasn't it? She's 13, the book ends when she's 14, and we don't really know what happens after that. And so we pick her up in one place, we leave her in somewhere else. She's kind of better off at the end of the book, I think, than at the beginning of the book. But so this book was to answer that question: what happens to a 13-year-old? You know, if they had a difficult start, and I wanted to answer that question with Patch. And I think I did by the end of the book without any spoilers. You know, I think I went down that road and answered that question. But Duchess, I would have to have a really compelling reason, other than I really miss the character. You know, I could
She's
go,
still with me.
yeah,
I am an outlaw.
I get it. Yeah,
I'm
I
an
think
outlaw.
I am as well. Yeah, I could go back, but it's not compelling enough, the reason, just because I miss her, or just because the book sold loads of copies. It would have to be something, you know, credible that had to do with her, or a question that needed answering, and at the moment, certainly for the foreseeable, not yet. But never say never.
Never say never, sorry.
I have one more comment. Not to hog the mic, but
Do we have any questions from the people?
I had a question about the characters' names. Patch, Saint, Grace specifically, how their names defined their character a little bit. If that was intentional, yes, I figured. And I also wanted to make a comment about, no spoilers, but the very last scene broke me. I loved it. It was beautiful.
That took months and months. I couldn't finish the book. I spent 4 years writing it, and I knew what I wanted to say at the very end, but I couldn't say it, and I couldn't finish it, and I couldn't leave the characters behind. So for months, I kept rereading the book from start to finish and getting to the end and just stopping and thinking it will come to me. And it came really late, you know, like it had been edited, and I said it's not finished, and we were talking about publication dates and things like that, and it still wasn't finished. And then I can't give the spoilers away, but the very end came so late, and it was really fortuitous, and I'd just been reading something and everything clicked into place, and it was a perfect ending. You know, it had been set up from page 1, so something on page 1 is relevant at the very end. But it was the last line as well. The last line was so difficult to write, and then I wrote it and then didn't want them to publish it. I just wanted to keep it forever. But the character names, it's the same, like with Duchess. You know, she is a girl that would rather disappear. Patch and Saint are kids that would probably rather not be stared at, like most kids, rather not be noticed, and they have these interesting names. And Saint is named Saint because her grandparents tell her that she's everything good. You know, her mum dies shortly after giving birth. She really is. She's Patch's moral compass. She's as close to perfect a character as I think I've ever written. And I loved Saint. I loved writing Saint. Every scene with Saint, she kind of steals in my eyes. and Patch because his name is Joseph Macaulay and his nickname is Patch because he was born with one eye. And his mum tells him he's a pirate when he's a kid, so that it kind of softens the blow of wearing an eye patch to school and makes him, instead of feeling just different, he feels special in a good way. And yeah, so that the characters are always named with that in mind.
This is a two-parter. Are you working on anything currently? And then with doing this book tour, spending more time in the United States, are you getting inspired for new locations?
That's a really good question. So I'm writing, the new book is called The Timekeeper, and my editor describes it as the time traveler's wife meets the Fault in Our Stars. So it's not crime. It's a love story, but I think I've been heading in that direction. We Begin at the End was barely a crime book. This, there's a crime in it, but I wouldn't call it a crime story. I think that's the least interesting thing in the story. And the second part of the question was about the traveling. Yeah, so the new book is set in upstate New York, where I haven't been. of all the places, and it's a long tour. Is it lovely? It's beautiful.
Yes.
Yeah, it looks beautiful. I'm worried that I'll mess it up if I've been there. Because, when I haven't been there, it's my world.
Yeah.
And I create it, and I worry that the real world will get in the way of it. But like flying over today and just looking out and thinking, this is where Patch and Sane are, and this is where the town is, and this is where they were born. And it felt very close to what I'd written. So I think I'm on the right track, and I don't want to mess with it.
Since you listen to a ton of dialect, and when you were writing the dialogue, were you hearing them talk in that dialect, or was it just like
I kind of just know it, and it was only when we were doing the audiobook, and they send you a load of actors reading the book, reading Sane and reading Patch, and there was I think there was about 8 people, and then I had to choose one of them or say which one was my favourite, and but they kind of hint at who they like as well, and it's always the same person that I like, and that was the first time I heard them, other than in my own head. And when I'm reading, because when you edit, sometimes it's a good idea to read aloud, so you read the entire book aloud, and you catch so many more mistakes that way, and so it was always in my head until right then. And it's still not exactly how I hear them. And people they're doing the TV adaptation at the moment, and I've just got the script, the pilot, and it's always someone else's interpretation of my story. But I think that's okay. I'm not really precious about it. I understand that it needs to exist in another format, and I have the absolute most talented people working on it, and I really respect them. And so when I heard Eduardo reading it, it was perfect. But his version of it was perfect. It was exactly as it needed to be. And loads of people have messaged me about it. And that's not always the case with an audiobook. They don't always get it exactly as a reader would like it, but he has completely nailed it. And I found out he was also in The Sopranos, which was really cool. Yeah, because I'm a massive Sopranos fan. So, yeah.
All right. One more question? Anyone in the audience? Okay, great.
I'm just wondering if you have a process for if you feel blocked or stuck. Do you have rituals or a process that
Not rituals, I just find the best ways to read. And I know loads of authors that don't read when they're writing, but for me it's the most inspiring thing, to read and exercise. I go a bit mad sometimes if I don't exercise. It's been really hard on tour, because the tour has been going on forever and will continue going on forever for the foreseeable future, to do Europe and things like that, and back to the US again later this year. And so that gets in the way of it slightly. And I don't write as much, I don't write anywhere but at my desk at home. So making notes on tour is not as good for me as writing. And I really need writing. I need exercise, I need reading. I do a lot of reading on planes and stuff. But at the moment I've been reading the pilot, the script, and looking at that. But yeah, reading, that is the key. I read Tomorrow and Tomorrow and Tomorrow. Has anyone read?
Yeah.
Something like, yeah, I read it like a year ago, 2 years, and I just can't stop thinking about it. It's like the best thing I've read in the last 5 years. I absolutely loved it so much.
Let's give another giant round of applause. We do have books available for sale at the desk. We are